Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
But is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you,
Mr.
while I have the authority, I will
clear.
continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country.
You said that, Mr. Is that
That law
accurate?
student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed.
Well,
she wrote an op-ed, and I'm talking to you about her particular case.
Claims and your
you
claims.
reclaiming my time. You revoked her student visa because
proudly.
she wrote an op-ed.
And
Would you revoke?
We're going to do more.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. On March 21st, 2025, the State Department approved the revocation of a student visa for Rumeysa Ozturk, a Turkish citizen who is a graduate student at Tufts University, apparently simply for writing an op-ed. According to an internal State Department memo, you took this action under your discretionary authority to revoke visas, and soon after you revoked her visa, armed and masked plainclothes officers snatched Ms. Ozturk off the street and transported her to a prison in Louisiana. Mr. Secretary, do you really think that Ms. Ozturk's op-ed results in a foreign policy consequence for the United States?
I believe that case involves someone whose visa we never would have granted had we known ahead of time.
I'm not asking you that question. I'm asking you if you think an op-ed, but that's exactly, in fact, what happened. The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Osturk's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities that were a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Osturk's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
But is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you,
while
I have the authority, I will continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says, and that means that you are trumping the legal supreme court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has a right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country apart.
Secretary Rubio, I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job who snatches her off the street.
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the national security consequences of people, masked men on the streets, snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting some of the country's most dangerous criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked? Is that
that law
accurate?
student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed which trumps the Supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed.
Well,
she wrote an op-ed, and I'm talking to you about her particular case.
Claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
You reclaiming my time. You revoked her student visa because
proudly.
she wrote an op-ed.
And
Would you revoke?
We're going to do more.
I have another question for you. Would you revoke the visa of someone in the United States who published claims that, quote, Jews are an untrustworthy and dangerous group? Yes or no?
We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest who's here to stir up trouble.
Are you going to revoke the visa of somebody who made that?
I mean, the case, I'll look at it. I'm looking to get crazy people out of our country.
Actually, it's not just about revoking. You actually,
revoking
Secretary Rubio, excuse me, reclaiming my time. Can you explain to me why the Trump administration granted refugee status to Charles Kleinhaus, the white Afrikaner who tweeted that exact statement that I just said? There's the case.
That's not a visa.
You granted that person to enter the United States.
That's a totally different process. That's someone that applied here through a totally different process.
Secretary Rubio,
visas are a privilege.
Secretary
we deny them all the time, and we'll revoke them. You revoked
a visa based on an op-ed, and then you allowed for masked men to snatch somebody off the street.
Your time is expired.
That's your claim. That's not accurate.
Recognize Ranking Member Meeks for a closing statement.
I'll be brief because this really is a sad day. But I want to, in my closing, just say thank you to the men and women of USAID who did their jobs, who have been forgotten about by this administration and this Secretary of State. You know, when you think about pathogens without passports that could kill millions, it was USAID teams. They were on the case to figure out how to strengthen lab surveillance and testing. They no longer can do that. When you think about more than a decade of gains by authoritarians and oligarchs, USAID teams were building new tools to help independent media survive and to provide insurance so anti-corruption and NGOs could fight back against specious lawsuits. They've been all wiped out, all of those organizations. When you think about the extreme weather caused by climate change that was wiping out livestock and farmland and driving the mass migration of millions, it was USAID teams were helping scientists and farmers experiment with different varieties of drought-resistant seeds while hustling up private sector partnerships to stay ahead of devastating droughts. This is who USAID was. This was the same organization that Senator Rubio was supporting and talking about when he traveled. And to come here today and to hear his remarks and not even, well, he did say one good thing. He said that he recognized that most of the people in the State Department and most of those foreign service agents were good people. They were great people. They served our country well. They deserved more than they've gotten under this administration and under your leadership as Secretary of State. And I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for taking the time with us today. Countless times you were not given the opportunity to respond to things. I'm going to take my time for my closing statement and yield you that time to respond to anything you wish to.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for the chance to interact with all of you. And obviously, I don't agree with some of the assessments, many of the assessments that are made here today, but I'm proud of the work we're doing. We're going to give you and deliver for our country a State Department that can deliver effective foreign policy in a way that's driven from our regional bureaus. I keep going to this because it's really important. That is the treasure of our State Department, is our regional bureaus and our embassies. That's where the action needs to be, and that's where it needs to happen. That's where the best ideas are coming from. The ranking member in his closing remarks said most of the people are good people. They are. They're even some of the people that lost their jobs. We didn't fire them because they were bad people. We fired them because their function was no longer needed. Or if they were removed. I'm proud of the reforms at the State Department. To date, I believe there's been we've had some people leave early, as they always do, and retire, but by and large, we've only had about less than 200 people removed from positions as a RIF because we closed down the Global Engagement Center and one other bureau. But we've undertaken a very meticulous and careful effort to develop a State Department that is going to be able to deliver results for the American people. The bottom line is this: we live in an era in which our foreign policy has to be driven by the national interest. What is good for America? What makes us stronger, more prosperous, or safer? That's it. That's our foreign policy. And everything we do, foreign aid, diplomacy, trade deals, arms sales, all of it has to be driven by that consideration. What the answer to that question is different in different countries and in different parts of the world. They just are. That's the way foreign policy has always been. That's the way it needs to be again if it's going to be successful. And that's what we're committed to delivering. And hopefully being able to work with you, we'll provide you. We've received all the input from various members of this committee on both sides of the aisle. We're almost done with our comment period. We'll have our final proposed reorganization that will be available to you in a congressional notification at that point, an official notification, not the preliminary, and then we can continue to work from there. And if in fact you're going to undertake the work of reauthorizing the State Department, I think that would be phenomenal. We would welcome that and the opportunity to work with you to create these structures in a permanent and enduring way. Thank you.